master of yourself? Well, if you're working on it, we've got a special Guys Radio for you this evening. This is your host, Robert Manni, and tonight I am honored to be interviewing Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., a Toltec master of transformation, one of the great spiritual teachers of our time, on Guys Radio this evening, 8 p.m. Pacific time on KCAA here in sunny Southern California, 102.3, 106.5 FM, 1050 AM. The pod drops worldwide tomorrow. Guys Radio, thanks for your support. We'll see you there.
It's Guy Radio. Here's your host, Robert Manni.
Welcome to Guys Radio. This is your host, Robert Manni, welcoming you to the show where men and women can be at their best. Guys Radio. This is a show where we go out and we find guests that will bring you new information that hopefully will make you think, make you feel, and inspire you to act. That's what we do on Guys Radio. We know everybody's busy, but there's a lot of information out there that can help us live our best lives. So what we do on Guys Radio, we get those guests for you to consider their information, and then it's up to you to do what you want with it or do nothing with it. It's up to you, but I'm going to keep bringing you the great guests. We've done over 500 interviews for Guys Radio. We've got one of our best guests ever today. I'm really excited. His name is Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. He is a noted Toltec teacher, author, and he's a wonderful, wonderful storyteller. His dad, you might know, Don Miguel Ruiz Sr., wrote the seminal spiritual book and Toltec book, The Four Agreements. Don Miguel Jr. has written a number of books. The most notable is The 5 Levels of Attachment, and this new book that we're going to talk about today, The Mastery of Self, A Toltec Guide to Personal Freedom, is really a deep dive into one of the top level of attachment from his earlier book, The 5 Levels of Attachment. So we're going to talk about mastery, which is number one. And it's a great show. I pre-recorded the interview with Don Miguel a couple of days ago, and he was just wonderful. I had so many things I wanted to get into. I wanted to touch on Toltec wisdom, Carlos Castaneda, Don Miguel Sr., of course, The 5 Levels of Attachment, Don Miguel Jr.'s book, and also the new book, The Mastery of Self, plus anything else that came up organically. We managed to get all of that through, and I give all the credit to Don Miguel because he is just a super mindful, present person. He's right there when you talk to him, and I really enjoyed it. I'm really glad to have made his acquaintance. He's very detailed. He's very thorough in his answers. He's articulate. He's authentic. He uses great analogies. A lot of times they're sports-oriented, so it's fun to listen to him. And he's just a cool guy and a wonderful storyteller and teacher. And I was so over-prepared. I had maybe 100 questions for him, and I wanted to get a lot of information out there for you, so I threw a lot of stuff at him. And rapid fire, multiple questions piled on top of each other from all different angles, and he managed to absorb all of it and come through with very, very articulate, patient, mindful, present answers. So I thank him for that. It's going to be a great show. Let's get to that interview right now on Guys Radio.
It's Guy Radio.
Guys Radio. Your host, Robert Manni. I have a very, very special guest today. His name is Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. We're going to discuss his new book today called The Mastery of Self. And I have to say, I related to so much with Miguel that I'm thrilled that he's on the show. And I think we're going to have a nice, fun, organic conversation and see if we can get some information out there, particularly at this time to help people kind of deal with some of the struggles that we're all having in a divisiveness and how you deal with, it's easy to judge now, it's easy to get upset. I notice on Facebook now, which is already a place where everybody likes to argue, that it's even more tense than ever. And it's to me, it's very problematic. And I notice myself pulling back and say, I'll just let this person state what they want to state. As crazy as it may seem to me, it's like, I'm not going to go there. And I think Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. is going to help us with that. He's a Nagual, a Toltec master of transformation. He's a direct descendant of the Toltecs and the Eagle Knight lineage, although he does not identify himself as such specifically, and he's the son of Don Miguel Ruiz. By combining the wisdom of his family's traditions with the knowledge gained from his own personal journey, he now helps others, and he's helped me already, realize their own path to personal freedom. And I'm thrilled that he's on Guys Radio today. Welcome, Miguel, to Guys Radio.
Hi, Robert. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm honored, and I'm very grateful to you. Thank you.
Well, let's start at the beginning, because as I was reading about you and your books, I was like, wow, his grandfather lived to 116. His grandmother lived a very long life. And Miguel, you helped her in her passing. Your dad gave you that task of to help your grandmother pass, help her cross over. And then your father is such a well-known spiritual teacher. What was it like for you and your Toltec? What was it like growing up in that type of family and that type of lineage and that type of household, and being able to kind of find your own personality and definition of who you are without getting trapped, if you will?
Well, it was fun. My grandmother, Madre Sarita, she was the spiritual head of the family. To a certain degree, she still is, even though she passed away 12 years ago. She's still a spiritual head of the family. So when people say I'm walking in my father's footsteps, I say, no, actually, both my father and I and my brother, we're all walking in my grandmother's footsteps. It's her desire. So I grew up in a family that, for example, my grandmother, Sarita, she was a faith healer. And my father and my uncles were doctors, Western medicine doctors, my father being a neurosurgeon, my uncle being a neurosurgeon, and my other uncle being an oncologist. And they would both refer patients to one another. My uncles, my dad would refer patients to my grandmother, who was a faith healer, and my grandmother, who was a faith healer, sent patients of hers over to my uncle. So you could say that I grew up with juxtapositions and dualities from the get-go. Not only was I born and raised in San Diego, California, I'm one of those rare cases that I lived in San Diego, Chula Vista to be exact, and I crossed over the border into Tijuana to go to school in Tijuana. And basically, I have an accent that reflects two cities, and I grew up with that way. I grew up with Western medicine and spirituality. I grew up with academics, with the International Baccalaureate and UCSD, University of California, San Diego, and the spirituality of my family. So for me, being able to see both sides and understand the whole spectrum of things and be willing to see it is how I grew up with a family that loved each other. My grandmother had 13 children. The next generation has 60. I have 64 cousins, and the next generation has even more. So, and I lived in the same house as my grandmother, which means every weekend the house was packed with people because everyone came to see my grandma. My grandpa passed away when I was much younger, and from that point of view, it's like I grew up in a place where family was first, love was definitely shown, and the complexities of relationships within a family were impacting me in a beautiful way. And you had, in my case, being the eldest of my father's students, eldest of his children, I got to witness Dr. Miguel Ruiz, apprentice Miguel Ruiz, and eventually Don Miguel Ruiz. I witnessed my father's journey from being that guy who, before he had an aha moment, and the guy who was battling his own demons or getting out of his own way, I can say, and then decided to make a completely right turn in life, letting go of the medical profession, going through a divorce with my mom, and going in a direction that is completely different. I went to school with kids who were all, parents were doctors and whatever. I went to private school in Tijuana, and my father stopped being one of them and became a shaman. And when I was growing up, to say that my father was a shaman or Nagual, people used to make fun of you for that. It wasn't really accepted very much. There's a taboo behind it.
Right.
To even say my grandmother was a curandera, there's a taboo behind that as well. So I grew up with that and witnessing my father make that tough jump that now as a 44-year-old, I can totally look at my father going as a 30-something-year-old, doing all that work to become a medical doctor and doing surgeries and neurosurgery, and all of a sudden in his mid to early 30s, no, mid 30s, he let it all go and he shifted course and went for something he wanted. Nothing was promised. This whole Don Miguel Ruiz and the Four Agreements was nothing promised. It took him about a good 11 years after that decision for the Four Agreements to come out. So in that transition, witnessing my father let go of a lot of superstition that surrounded the family, tradition, the Toltec tradition in our family, and put it into something called common sense. Well, that teaching that my father gave reflected upon me. And we can say that it goes into that whole juxtaposition and understanding both sides of things, because I got to see the apprenticeship of my father dealing with it to the point where when he finally became Don Miguel Ruiz, his teachings with us was more of a action reaction. You learn from the consequences of your choices. Whereas Dr. Miguel Ruiz expected straight A's from you and demanded straight A's from you, Don Miguel Ruiz expected nothing. He says, this is your life. Let life be the teacher. Conquer death by becoming alive, that kind of thing. And he let me experience myself, make choices in my own life at a very young age, in high school and college and all that. And the consequences were my teacher, and that's how he taught. Mm-hmm. So that, you can say that impacted my upbringing quite a bit. But the constant through all of that was love, love we have for our family.
Now, the four agreements, I believe, are be impeccable with your word, don't take anything personally, don't make assumptions, always do your best. What was the trigger, if you will, using that term, for your dad's coming up with this notion of the four agreements and moving away from the Western medicine to shamanism?
Well, the trigger, the aha moment he had was he had a car accident where something happened that he couldn't explain. He doesn't know if it was a dream or hallucination or whatnot, but he remembers almost moments before the accident, and he was young and still a university student, and he was partying. He'd been drinking a bit, and he slammed the car into a wall, and he saw himself leave his body, take everyone out of the car, and there he plowed. He couldn't explain that. He couldn't explain how he survived. He couldn't explain any of that. None of the logical explanations would fit. And he went to the one person he trusted at the time, which is his grandfather, Don Leonardo Macias, my grandma's father. At that time, he was the head of the family. And he began to ask questions. And my grandmother and him continued his journey. So that you could say that's the moment where he had an aha moment. Mm-hmm. The path I'm going in right now is harming me. The aha moment that led him to let go of being a doctor is that he felt as if he was in a treadmill dealing with, how can I say, symptom after symptom and never finding the root. And that's a quote he said. That's how he said it to me. Mm-hmm. I kept going after symptom and dealing with the symptom, but I never got to the root. And when he let go of being a medical doctor, he felt like he was going straight for the root. What is the root of all this unhappiness? What's the root of all this? Because with faith healing, for example, you can say the power of the placebo effect is the core of it. If you give someone who's sick a sugar pill, and if they really believe in that medicine right. will heal you. But It's not really medicine, it's sugar. And a placebo effect can work in a beautiful way in that way, or it could cut the other way. The placebo effect can harm you if you believe in beliefs or conditions that subjugate your will. So from that point of view, he saw that a lot of people were getting sick because they believed in those negative placebo effects. Mm-hmm. So from that point of view, he let go of it. He let go of the profession of being a medical doctor, a family psychiatrist as well. And he went for his own personal journey. And something he's always said was, if I can do it, you can do it. Because I could do it. And if I could do it, of course you can do it. So he's always approached that that mantra has been the thing that helps him. Like it's you can say his humility comes from that. So for him, that was the catalyst to let go of being a medical doctor, the catalyst to begin to even search. So two moments in time that shifted his perception so much. And of course, in letting go of being a medical profession, he let go of that domesticated conditioned belief of if you're not somebody until you become that one doctor or that one lawyer, that one whatever that elusive carrot is. He let go of it. He stopped chasing it and said, "No, I'm the source. I'm the step one. This is the beginning." And
now, how old were you at the time, Miguel?
I was 8 years old.
Okay. Did you have any idea of what was going on? Like, my dad's not going to the hospital anymore. He's like doing other stuff, or what?
Yeah, it wasn't like an exact shot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like he had to finish. You know, it started with not taking any new patients and finishing the work he had with his patients. You know, he didn't. That's the way he transitioned. So it was a gradual thing, and I was somewhere in 4th grade or 5th grade when my father finally let go of it. And to tell my classmates that he was a shaman now and not a medical doctor, it was, you know, it's
right.
It was an interesting time, you know, a lot of taboo, but luckily for all of us, it all worked out in the end.
Okay. Guys Radio, your host, Robert Manni. Our very special guest is Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. We're going to talk about his new book, The Mastery of Self. We've been talking about his dad, but the new book is a Toltec Guide to Personal Freedom. Toltec, I read as a kid, I was drawn to all the Carlos Castaneda books, and I recently interviewed a friend of yours, HeatherAsh Amara.
Yes.
We talked about that. We really connected. What's your understanding of Castaneda? What does your dad think of him? All of those books, are they on target with the Toltec? Is where you are different from that? Talk to us about all of that.
Well, it's different, but it's the same. You know, let's go with the word Toltec is a Nahuatl word that in English means artist. That's what the word means. So when we say the Toltec tradition, we're saying the artist tradition or the tradition of the artist. There's the Mesoamerican culture that existed over 500 years ago that ceased to exist with the expansion of the Aztec Empire or the Spanish Empire. At that moment, it ceased to be a culture with a central capital, and it became an oral tradition because people continued to practice it, but in their own unique ways. There are people in Mexico that practice it exactly as it was 500 years ago, and then there's families like mine that practice it as each generation goes. For example, my grandma would say, if you practice the Toltec tradition the way your father and I practice it, you're killing the tradition. And the reason why is because you're not letting life be the teacher. You know, the lessons you will share are the lessons you've experienced in your life. So there's that tradition that goes from generation to generation that teaches it as best as they can, but adds to it. They're always adding, and because they're adding to it, it transforms. So from that point of view, by nature, the tradition of my family, that Don Ezequiel Macias, my great-great-grandfather, the one who lived to be 116 years of age, he was born somewhere in the 1830s. He's the first Mexican in the family. And I say that because his parents were born in the New Spain, and the concept of Mexican did not exist. They were subject to the king. The whole concept of Mexican was during the Mexican independence. So from that point of view, Don Ezequiel says we're Toltec, and that's how we do it. You know, but I could be completely fanatical and says, no, it's definitely that way. But you know, every person has learned it in their own unique way, each generation. Like Don Ezequiel was, according to the legend, he was the trickster, traditional shaman that you read about. Don Leonardo was a military and a musician and a band leader. He taught through music. His daughter, Madre Sarita, taught through faith healing. Her son, Don Miguel Ruiz, through logic and common sense. That's what he uses to describe it. And myself, I apply the continuing common sense point of view, but mixed in with modern. I'm speaking English at least. So you add Carlos Castaneda, and the teachings there are Don Juan, Don Juan is the teacher of Carlos Castaneda, and Carlos Castaneda learns from the teachings of his tradition of the Yaqui Indian, the Yaqui tribes in the Sonoran Desert. And they use mezcalito, they'll use the allies that are the hallucinogenic plants as to induce an experience. Now, there's beautiful, especially when they're guided, the way he guided Carlos Castaneda, according to the story. Whether it happened or not, we don't know. But the lessons are there to learn from, and they're very powerful. My grandmother didn't use such allies. We in our family, we don't use peyote, we don't use ayahuasca, we don't use those things. They are not our ally. My grandmother always taught us that we can get there with discipline. You can hear Don Leonardo all over it in that one for the word discipline. That she taught us how to use our breath, how to focus our attention. If you've ever done any breath work, you know what you're talking about. You can hear what she's talking about, because I've done a breath work session in my life once, and it took me very far, and I did a lot of healing, and man, it taught me that the only hallucinogenic I need is oxygen. So from the point of view, I learned my grandma's teachings in the form of disciplines. Quiet the mind, learn to quiet the mind, because if you don't quiet or heal the mind, you're bringing whatever that's in to that space.
Okay.
So right there, there's a little difference, and that's just a point of view.
Got it.
My father, when he became a shaman, he really engaged all that magic, and then there was a point where he renounced to power and decided not to be a shaman and just be a teacher. And the Four Agreements is exactly that moment in time when he decided to put everything in a language that is common sense, that is not meant for a certain small group of people or a certain particular type of people, but for everyone in a language that they can understand. So from that point of view, there's you can say that's the one big difference between Castaneda and Ruiz. My father has read Castaneda, especially when I was young. When I remember being a teenager, my father reading Castaneda, and then at one point he stopped reading it. Sometime in the early 90s, he stopped reading it. But he always had respect for Castaneda and Don Juan in particular. He always wanted to hear or read a book written by Don Juan. That's what.
Yes.
My dad always wanted to read a book straight from Don Juan, which I don't think he ever got to. I'm not sure there is one. I haven't searched for it, so there might be. Who knows? But that's the differences. But that's just two families. There's many more. There's people in Mexico City who practice it. I forgot his name. There's this one guy. There's other people out there who also teach it as unique as they do it. Some people really with the spirituality side, with all the incense and the smoke and all that kind of thing. Then there's the people who, like Don Leonardo, do it through music. They teach someone how to focus your attention. Like, for example, Don Leonardo would have his apprentices focus their attention on one instrument in an orchestra. And if their attention got drawn away by another instrument, he would have that apprentice start all over again, and until they were able to get to the very end of the song following one instrument in a very complex piece of music. So that's an example of my grandmother's teachings in regards to attention. Wherever you focus your attention is what controls your life. And from there, the next step would be dealing and mastering the mitote, which is 1,000 voices all talking at the same time.
Got it.
The image I like to use for mitote is, imagine you're in the 50-yard line in a stadium. You're the very center, whether it's football or soccer, that's the center. Now imagine the stadium full with people, whether it's 45 to 60, 70,000 at the queue, or over 100,000 at the Pasadena Rose Bowl. You sit there in the center. Imagine everyone in that stadium screaming, yelling, trying to hook your attention. And then the question lies, the ones that you're attracted to is the one that's going to speak the loudest to you. In a place where 100,000 people are, the one that resonates, the one reaches you, is the one you're attracted to in some way, negative or positive or good or bad, whatever. And that's the mitote. So that sound, just imagine that sound being inside your own head, because now every single thought inside your own head is doing exactly the same thing, trying to hook your attention.
I've experienced that playing baseball where you hear one person in the stands and it can completely throw you off if you allow it. If you're not still, if you allow it to, you lose your focus. But
Yeah, exactly. It reminds me of that movie, For the Love of the Game with Kevin Costner, when he says, activate the mechanism, and the whole janky stadium goes
silent. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Your grandmother used to say, is knowledge controlling you, or are you controlling knowledge? And that's a theme that comes through your book, The Mastery of Self. Why is that so important for our listeners?
It was the question that my grandmother did throughout my apprenticeship with her. It's like, do you control knowledge, or does knowledge control you? And she would, of course, vary it. She was say, is the bottle drinking you, or you drinking the bottle, and change it time and time again. At the age of 14, I had no idea what that meant. But as time progressed, I began to understand that it's a question that you can answer in different stages of your life. So in the 5 levels of attachment, I chose to answer it in each level. For example, at level 1, the authentic self, the answer is, I'm aware of that I am life. And regardless of what I think, regardless of what I know, I am aware that I'm alive right now. So that's the answer. I am alive, regardless of what I think, regardless of knowledge. At level 2, preference, the answer is, I am accepting of my authentic self, but I will use knowledge as an instrument to inform my choices, but I'm the one making the choices. At level 3, identity, knowledge and I are one. I think, therefore I am, or I am what I think. So at that point, the more I get attached to something, an attachment is to make something that's not a part of you by investing of yourself emotionally or intellectually to something. So at this level 3, identity, knowledge and I are one. At level 4, mind you, internalization. Knowledge gives me the rules by which I live my life. It gives me the rules by which whom I should love, how I should love them, and how I should love myself, and how I should accept myself, and how I'm supposed to be a man, how I'm supposed to be Toltec, how I'm supposed to be a whatever. At that point, the 4 agreements turn into the 4 conditions of our personal freedom. Meaning by that is that we corrupt the 4 agreements and use them as an instrument of domestication or conditioning, and we pretend to be something we're not. At that moment, knowledge has control of us. And at level 5, fanaticism, knowledge has complete and total control of who I am. In fact, I see myself as an identity, a word, and I don't see my humanity. You know, the more we get attached to something, the less and less I'm aware of my own humanity, and which means less and less I'm aware of anyone else's humanity as well. So do you control knowledge, or does knowledge control you? It's a question of, where are you at today? Are you giving of yourself so much that what you give power to has power over you, which is our knowledge is our creation, and now our creation controls us? Or am I aware that knowledge is my creation? I'm the source by which it exists. And when I understand that knowledge is my creation, that my thoughts are not who I am, that they're my creation, they're my projection, then I can understand that I'm not this body, I'm not this mind, I'm the force that gives it life. I'm life.
So you're God then, experiencing itself through you.
Yeah,
that's what we do, right?
Yeah, exactly. I am aware that I am a part of the whole. Mm-hmm. Not, and when we say that I'm God, is more in the sense that the mind doesn't say it at first.
Right.
When we first start this journey, the mind says I'm God, but the mind is not God.
Right.
Then when you say this body is God, but no, this body is the creation, and then you get to the point where you ask yourself, when did my life start? And then you become aware that it didn't start when I was born. It didn't start when I was conceived, because the sperm and the ovum that gave me life already had life.
Right.
You know, if the ovum or the sperm were dead, the conception would not exist, which means life started way before my conception. And all of a sudden you start realizing the imagination begins to expand. It didn't start with my parents. It didn't start with my grandparents. And it reaches this apex where all of us have a same or a similar relative. And then it goes all the way down to what we know as Adam and Eve. And then you find out about the DNA and that we are related to one another in the sense that humans are related to plants, to animals, and also it expands again until you reach that point of the Big Bang or the hand of God. And also from that point of view, God is everything that exists.
Right. And God is love. So then love is everything.
Yes.
Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. is our special guest on Guys Guys Radio, your host, Robert Manni. We're talking about the new book, Mastery of Self, and we have those five different types of people, basically, or levels of attachment: the authentic, the preference, identity, internalization, fanaticism. It seems like in this country right now that there's a real problem with these agreements. And I know that's the earlier book, but I think it still has a lot to do with Mastery of Self, because you're taking the highest level, number one, the Mastery of Self, for this new book. But I think it'd be helpful for people to understand how these five levels are expressed in day-to-day life. And I'll give you an example. We don't get political on Guys Guys Radio, but I think when you look at the landscape right now, there's so much divisiveness, and there's, to me, a lot of people are in that level 5, which is the fanaticism, where no matter what type of noise comes out, you're on this side or you're on that side, and it's very difficult for people to even, let's say you're a liberal, but you're not for vaccines. You're going to get obliterated by both sides on, for some different issues. You can't, it's almost like you're not allowed to be middle of the road or like look at issues. It's like you're on that team or you're on that team. Help us out with that, Miguel.
Yeah, it does seem like being a moderate is not such a good thing anymore, according to some people, but they're a minority. The people who think that is really a minority, they're very loud. The image I like to use to describe it, because I'm aware that talking politics or religion, in describing the levels of attachment, at level 2 or level 3, I'll begin to lose people because the triggers can happen. So the way I used it is I used sports. So to adapt what I said, to bring it to smaller syntax here, let's imagine you're in the stands of any sporting event, and imagine that it's the first time you ever go to a sporting event. So like you've never been to anything. Let's say you went to soccer or football or basketball or whatever. This is your very first time, and if you remember the first time, it's an exciting thing, but you still you're trying to figure out what's happening. All right, at level 1, the authentic self, you go to the game. The referee blows his or her whistle to start the game or to end the game. Win or lose, it doesn't matter to you. You enjoyed those 60 minutes, those 90 minutes, depending on which sport you watch, and you enjoyed it because the separation between you sitting in the stands and where the field begins is clearly defined. That line is set, and you know that you're here to enjoy this moment in time, 60 to 90 minutes, depending on the game, like I said before. And you enjoyed it. When you leave the game, you leave the stadium, it says nothing about who you are. It doesn't impact your life at all, other than you enjoyed it.
Got it.
Level 2, preference. You've become aware that if you invest a little of yourself, you're going to enjoy this game a bit more, like the roller coasters, so the highs or lows. And it all comes down to choosing a side. So you look at both teams and you see, all right, which one do I like better? You look for a color that you like, a city or town. For example, I grew up in San Diego, so I'll look for the hometown teams, or the neighborhood teams. I look at the players and I find a name that's Ruiz or someone similar like Miguel, or like a cousin's name or a friend's name. You look for little elements of yourself, right. And you say, okay, I'm going to root for that team. It doesn't mean that you're going to root against the other team. You just want this team to do good.
Got it. Mm-hmm.
So when the game goes up, you enjoy the roller coaster pretty much. The highs of the game, the lows of the game. And it's fun,
It can be more fun that way, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You have a little bit of involvement.
Exactly. Right. So when the referee blows his or her whistle, though, when the end comes, you're able to separate yourself from the team that you invested in, because you realize that it's not really you. You stand up, and it doesn't mean it doesn't impact who you are, other than you enjoyed. If they won, great. If they didn't win, too bad, next time. But you enjoyed it. You still have a clear line between separating the stands and the field. Sometimes when you invest in yourself emotionally, that line starts getting blurred, like at level 3, identity. Now I'm going to identify myself. Those things that I looked for at level 2, now I'm going to make it a little bit personal, and I'm going to put on those colors. Yeah, exactly.
I've got my Chargers shirt on here. I'm San Diego, even though they're not here anymore. But
yeah, I know. Yeah, that impacted me too. You know, I was born and raised with the Chargers, and now they're not San Diego, so I'm like,
right.
Well, they're attached, right? But at level 3, when I was like a Charger fan, when I was, I was a fan. I'm not a fan anymore, but I like them, but not to that degree, because they no longer represent me. But back then they did. And when the game ended, when the referee blew the whistle to end the game, if they lost, that impacted my rest of my week. If they won, that impacted my rest of the week. All of a sudden, it began to bleed. That separation between the stands and the field gets blurred, because now I'm taking it a little personal. You know, the success makes me feel good about myself, and the failure makes me feels not so good. Mind you, up until this point, level 1, level 2, level 3, if I see a Raider fan, or I see a Jets fan, or a Giants fan, or a Patriots fan, I'm not gonna give them any hard time. I'm gonna say, hey, good luck to your team, man. Your Tom Brady's pretty good. Glad that Chucky is back for the Raiders. You know, I miss the days of Vinny Testaverde with the Jets. You know, they were great when.
I don't, as a Jets fan, long-time Jets season ticket holder, I don't miss Vinny Testaverde.
There you go. You know, the 2 times I saw the Jets play were against Oakland in Oakland, and both times the Jets beat Oakland in playoff contention. It was funny. Anyways, but as you saw right now, when we saw a little bit of ourselves, you saw the color. There's a certain excitement, and the conversation we just had, the little banter, is fun. You know, it's amicable. You're gonna buy each other a beer. You know, the color of the jersey you're wearing doesn't impact your relationship. In fact, it kind of enhances it.
Exactly.
Because you found a common thing that you enjoyed. At this point, identity is a beautiful thing, because it's an icebreaker that allows us to create a bond. Mm-hmm. At level 4, though, it changes. Now, this conditions of what it is to be a Charger fan, or a Raider fan, or a Jets fan, or a Giants fan, or a Patriots fan, or whatever. Now it begins to tell you who you're supposed to like and not like. You know, as a Charger fans, we're not supposed to like Raider fans and Patriots fans. You know, Giants. You know, like they kept Eli, so we'll keep Rivers. You know, but at that point, it gives you the rules of who to accept and who not to accept. It tells you, like, instead of buying beer, you're not going to be buying this person a beer. You're going to tell them why they're terrible and why they're dumb and why they're stupid, because they follow their team. And they don't even know the person, but they're going to be arguing. And they're not going to give way, because if they admit defeat, if they ever said, you're right and I'm wrong, then I'm not a good fan, and I'm never going to admit it. So at that point, that goes around.
And their self-value is...
Yeah, exactly. I have to be a good fan. I have to live up to an image of what that fan is. And at that point, the culture of the team dictates your relationship with yourself and other people. At that point, knowledge has control of me. It gives me the rules by which I love myself. At level 5, fanaticism, those rules completely are complete. You know, I don't see you. I see the color. I see an identity, a symbol that I either agree with or disagree with. And if I see a symbol, well, at level 4, I'm not buying you a beer. I'm gonna give you a hard time. But at level 5, I'm punching you. I'm kicking you. I'm hurting you, because I don't see a human being. I see the personification of something I don't agree with. And especially other fans, if other fans around me, they also have to believe, they have to act, and they have to behave, because all of them represent me, and that you better not make me look bad. and it's a sport. It's a game. You can say that at level 1, there's a separation between the field and the stand. At level 2, a little bit of an emotional investment allows you to enjoy the game a bit more. But when the end comes, that line is not blurred at all. It's clear. At level 3, that line is blurred, whether the game is going on or outside the game. The game only lasts 60 minutes or 3 hours with all the timeouts and halftime and all that. But it begins to impact the rest of the week. So it impacts you all year long. Even in the off season, it impacts you. At level 4, that line is completely blurred. You start seeing yourself in those players. Those players represent you as you represent them. And at level 5, you think that you've jinxed your team because you didn't put on your shirt right. You washed it. You're jinxing the team. Why did you wash? You should have put on the shoe on the left side this year. You should have started with the right. That's what allowed us to win. And you're so invested, you believe it. Now here's the thing. Sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. So with politics and religion, and I'll stick with politics since you talked about it. There's a level 1, you vote. You're gonna vote for or not. You don't care. At level 2, you have a preference, and you're willing to vote for the other side, but you're basically gonna vote for the person who has the right idea. At level 3, you're gonna see yourself as blue or red, or whatever, or purple, whatever. And at that point, you're more inclined to color and vote in that way, but the line is starting to blur. At level 4, you only vote for your color, blue or red, and you're not going to be friends with anyone who is either blue or red in the opposite direction. You're not going to be, you're not going to talk to them. At level 5, you don't see human beings. You see a symbol that, why would I care if they lived or die?
Like you see the red hat, for some people are going to go, oh no, the MAGA hat, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The MAGA hat, right?
The MAGA hat, or the Black Lives Matter, or
Whatever.
or whatever
Mm-hmm.
image, of feminism, of the old boys club, or it's they're all symbols of preference that once you become attached to them, you'll corrupt them, and you'll corrupt just like the way I can corrupt beautiful images. For example, the 4 agreements at level 1, level 2, level 3, those are the 4 agreements, but at level 4, level 5, those are the 4 conditions.
Got it.
And I call them the 4 conditions because they become the symbol by which we domesticate ourselves. And at that point, level 4, level 5, you're not listening to the other side because you don't want to be wrong. And even if you're wrong, you'll never admit it because there's no way we're going to ever admit that. And at that point, a debate, the nature of a debate is to find the right path. That's the nature of you propose all these ideas, you defend that idea for the benefit of the whole. But nowadays, a debate is my side wins, your side loses, whether we're right or in the wrong. It doesn't matter as long as we win this election.
Yep. Very well spoken. Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., let's talk about the new book, The Mastery of Self. So we talked a lot about the 5 levels of attachment. Now you have the new book. What is this about? How can people benefit from this book? How can people use the book? What are the key learnings?
For me, the mastery of self is the moment where I stop pretending to be something I am not for the sake of someone else's point of view or judgment, including my own. And it's the moment where I accept myself just the way I am. It's a book that I began to write when I'm in the first book, which is the 5 levels of attachment. I was going down from level 5 to level 4 to level 3. And from level 3 to level 2, that's when this book came about. And my publisher stopped me because I was going off on tangent. I was about to break the whole rhythm of the book because I started exploring it. And he says, hit save, put it aside, and keep the line on this one. Keep your discipline and staying on note, on point with this book. So when that book ended, then I began to explore this tangent, which is the mastery of self, which is the moment where I no longer see myself as an identity with a symbol, with a definition, mind you. And I started seeing myself as the experience of who I am. So at that point, I begin to shed all my conditions, all these beliefs that I have about myself, and I start seeing myself as I am. And then it starts out with this analogy of a party. Imagine yourself that you're the only sober person in a party where everyone is drunk, and everyone in the party is everyone you know, your family, your friends, your coworkers, everyone's in here, and everyone's in different stages of drunkenness. You can be talking to two people. One person has opened their third or fourth bottle of wine and they're blacked out already, but somehow they're functioning. And the other one has been nursing the same glass for several hours and they barely put a dent on that. Now imagine talking to everyone in the party, and they're in between the two of them. Some people, the more you talk to, the more drinks they have. Like it's like a different personality with each cup and with each glass. And then they stop drinking and they sober up, and they become present, and then they have one more drink, and then there's the slippery slope. Imagine everyone going up and down their levels of attachment or their levels of awareness. They go up and down. So at that point, the question is, what are you going to do? They're not drunk on alcohol. They're drunk on the drama of the party. What are you going to do? Are you going to leave the party? Or are you going to stay? If you stay, are you going to drink from the same fountain, or are you going to stay in your discipline? And that's the awareness. What choice do I want to make? Do I want to go down that slippery slope that makes me forget myself? Or I stay in my intent and I continue to choose to engage everyone in my life? You can say that the example of that would be exactly Facebook. You decide to stay out of whatever conversation or arguments are happening right now. And as you were pointing out before the interview, there's a lot of minefields in there that you can have an emotional reaction to. You can stay in your discipline after a couple of minutes of looking, and then there comes that one person that always posts something that makes you go grrr. At that moment, you have a choice. Right. You're going to drink of that cup of emotional reaction, which is anger and frustration, and you're ready to argue, or you're going to let go. It's like, all right, that's the point of view, and I'm not going to hit like at all on that one because I don't like it, but I'm not going to argue. At that point, you have a choice. What's your choice? And that's where you know yourself. What kind of consequence do you want to experience?
Okay, we're running short on time, but I want to get some points out there that people can really take away with them for our listeners. What are some of the simple steps that people can do? Because it's all about choice. You're going to make a choice in every instance with every person you deal with every emotion. What are some of the categories that we have to make choices in, and how do we make choices so we're not driving ourselves crazy mentally? Like, I have to do this or this. You don't want to get into overthink. Mm-hmm. What can people do?
Well, first ask yourself, what kind of consequence do you want to experience? And the answer is going to come either by your domesticated beliefs that you're supposed to, at level 4, level 5, what we were talking about before, or you look at something and you look at, all right, I don't want to experience that hangover and arguing with people sometimes comes with that hangover. Sometimes it's worth it, but it's sometimes there's value in it. But it really comes down to what kind of consequence you want to experience. And in order for that to happen, you have to know yourself. You know what makes you happy, what doesn't make you happy, what is worth your time. Like my dear friend Kirk Summer says, is the juice worth the squeeze? I love that phrase. Is the juice worth the squeeze? Meaning by that, in my translation, is the consequence worth the effort? Part of your free will is to say yes and no to things you want to say yes and no to, that your no is just as powerful as your yes. That's what personal freedom is. I'm free to say yes to the things I want to say yes to and no to the things I want to say no to. If I want to take something personally, it's because I want to take it personally. That's personal freedom. To respect myself, to make my own choices also comes, like Uncle Ben told Peter Parker, with great power comes great responsibility. If you want the power of your free will, it also comes with respecting yourself to experience the consequences of your own choices. With that in mind, what consequences do you want to experience? And at that point, it's either your attached beliefs that will answer it or you. And what I mean by you is that you know what makes you happy You know what doesn't make you happy. You know what brings joy to your life. You know what feels good to you and what doesn't.
Okay.
So from that point of view, that's it. Know yourself.
I want to get one last thought in here, and that is about your position on unconditional versus conditional love. And it seems like that's the real foundation of this book, The Mastery of Self. Could you just explain that for our listeners, please?
Sure. In the short time I have, conditional love is seeing only what we want to see. Unconditional love is the willingness to see life as is, or seeing others as they are, not as we want to see them. Conditional love makes us see something that we want to see, pretend to be something that we are not. For example, in my case, to see myself only as Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. But that guy doesn't exist. I exist. And this person that's talking to you right now, yes, part of that phase, that how I interact with the world, is Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., but I'm also father, I'm also dad, I'm also husband, I'm also son, I'm also friend, I'm also so many things. And I'm the source of it all. Everyone sees me in a totally different way. But what matters the most is how I see myself, because I am the constant in every relationship that I am in. But I am the constant all throughout my life. How do I see myself? As I want to see myself, or as I really am? At that point, knowing myself is not getting to an identity with a definition, but to know myself through the experience of being me.
Perfect. Well, listen, Guys Radio, our special guest, I'm so thrilled, Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. Such a pleasure to meet you. I thoroughly enjoyed your books. I highly recommend it to our listeners. The 5 Levels of Attachment, The Mastery of Self, and Living a Life of Awareness. And I have like 35 more questions, and we could go on for hours and hours. So hopefully you'll come back at some point to Guys Radio and help us out here. That would be great. And number 2, if you could tell our listeners where they can find more about you, your teachings, and get your books.
Well, Robert, I want to say thank you so much for having me on your show. It's an honor. You can find us in our website at miguelruiz.com or miguelruizjr.com. That's miguelruizjr.com. That's our home base. And yes, we're on Facebook and Instagram and all those kind of things, but that's our base. So our books you can find in your local bookstore, luckily, and also on YouTube and things like that. But I would say if there's a message to tell anyone out there, it's just enjoy being you, enjoy your life, enjoy being you, and having fun with everyone you love in life.
Love it. Thank you so much, Miguel. Pleasure to meet you, and I hope you come back at some point. Thanks.
Pleasure meeting you too, Robert. Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
It's Guy Radio.
What a wonderful interview with a really terrific guy, a real guy's guy, Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. And so what was our takeaway? There's so much I learned today, and I hope you guys did also. But I think the number one thing is, the mastery of self starts with learning the difference between conditional love and unconditional love, and starting with yourself, learning to love yourself unconditionally, forgive yourself, and then look at other people the same way. Be less judgmental, more open to just listening, not having to engage and take sides on everything. And we're in a very divisive time in our country, and I think if everybody took Don Miguel's advice and counsel on this, we'd be a lot better off. So I'm certainly going to work on myself for this, and I thank him for that. So Guys Radio, we're here on KCAA in Southern California every Wednesday evening, prime time Wednesday evening at 8 p.m., 102.3, 106.5 FM, 1050 AM. The show rebroadcasts on Sundays at 2 p.m., and the podcast drops every Thursday. You can consume it wherever you get your pods all over the world. Also, you can catch me all over social media, Robert Manni. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. My website is robertmanni.com. We've got over 300 blog posts there about life, love, and the pursuit of happiness. And of course, there's a lot. You can get 3 free chapters of the source material for Everything Guys Guy, which is my novel, The Guy's Guide to Love. It's kind of a sexy romp through the world of advertising through the eyes of 2 guys in the year 2005 in New York City. It's a fun book, It's been called the Male Sex and the City, the Guy's Guide to Love. So we've got great shows coming up for the next couple of months. I know everybody's dealing with the virus and everything and trying to see how we can get back to work and get things going again. And I just would say, be safe, be strong, be patient, and be loving towards an understanding of each other, because it's trying times for everybody. So thank you so much for being a listener. I thank you so much for your support. If you want to really support the show, give us a review, a rating on Apple Podcasts, and subscribe there also. So we'll see you next week, Guys Radio. And as I always like to say, guys, finish first.